sorry, I couldn't help it. Like,
it's a great example. Didn't think we were going to go there.
Chad Peterman here, and you are listening to Can't Stop the Growth, a platform for leaders and teams to grow and thrive. We highlight the importance of personal development, pursuing greatness, and always chasing your potential. Let's get into it.
Excited to be with you guys. Obviously a little bit different format, but we wanted to stick to our commitment. The topic of this particular talk is really a reflection on the first 10 Maxwell irrefutable laws. So we went through each one of the first 10, and obviously that's a lot of me talking and a lot of kind of my points of view and different stuff like that. Obviously, Andrew takes up, every other week and talks about potentially a different topic, but a lot of related topics as well. And so what I want to kind of do here is kind of dive into some of the 10 laws and just kind of get his perspective on a couple of different things associated with each law. And so I think this will be interesting and excited to share it with you. And so when we first think about it, the first law is the law of the lid. It's one of probably the most famous laws that Maxwell has. And it's all about, is your leadership a limiting factor in what it is that you're doing, how you're leading your people, and different stuff like that. So I guess my first question for Andrew is, have you ever experienced a situation where leadership was the limiting factor in an organization's success? And then maybe how did you address that? I think that could be impactful for some who are thinking about this.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for welcoming me on the show.
Absolutely.
This is great. I've always wanted to sit in this room.
Yeah.
I also thought you had a great opportunity there to make a dig at me for my World War II and Vietnam talk, but, dig opportunity missed. Situation you said where there was a leadership.
Was the limiting factor in an organization's success.
Wow. I find it fitting that I'm here right now because I would say that's me. I'm the lid. I was the lid. I was the limiting factor. I think I talked a little bit about assuming the role of principal in like the beginning of a school year. I'd been a teacher I taught for 3 years in my 4th year, because once you're a teacher for 3 years, you become an expert, right? So they made me like an academic coach. I took over as principal, and I would say that entire experience encapsulated, if Maxwell ever goes back and does another version of this book, he could use my example there, because like I was a complete and utter lid, and really stifled and probably hindered a lot of the progress that we needed to have happen. I think that I probably went into that situation having success as an individual contributor, as a teacher, thinking like, oh, I'm good at this. Like, I've been in leadership situations, but this is my first time being in a professional situation and holding a leadership role. And there were just, I tell you what, because it was pretty much like the school didn't like burn down or like fail, but I would say overall it was probably like a failed adventure in leadership. And so I don't have like a lot of great examples from it, but we always used in teaching a lot of, we use non-examples to demonstrate examples. And so like non-examples, why it was a failure, I would say, I didn't really invest in a lot of leadership development myself. Leadership to me was just like one of those things that you just like, it was innate. You either had it or you didn't have it. You had experience with it or you didn't. So I wasn't reading the books. I wasn't like finding role models or mentors or asking questions or doing my own research. It was just like, oh, I have a title now. I'm the boss. I didn't empower the other teachers, the other adults in the building. And therefore I also didn't delegate. And so I kept a lot of, that really like didn't enable teachers to grow themselves. And so I bottlenecked a lot of decisions into me. Like I got to decide all these things instead of empowering and delegating. This is going to sound absolutely obnoxious, being as though it was a school, but I didn't really like create and foster like a learning environment where like teachers were making mistakes. It was all a lot of like trying to fix problems and not getting people to be self-reflective. And I would say myself as well was probably a failure, like not reflecting on the experience, not getting feedback from the teachers themselves on, a 360, perspective of like, hey, how effective or ineffective more so am I as a leader?
Yeah.
So,
No, I think that's a great example. And I think, while your example is in teaching, I'm sure a lot of people can relate to being put into a new role, not knowing what to do. Where do I start? What am I supposed to be doing? All of those things. And I think that when we're navigating leadership, I've always kind of defaulted to like, I need to be doing something, right? It's just, I can't be sitting back. I may not know what to do, but here's a book and it says to do this. So maybe I ought to try this. And that's why I think, to your point of creating kind of that learning environment where you're yourself learning, and then also, fostering kind of others to kind of do that as well.
yeah. Can I make another connection that
Sure.
was kind of occurred to me? So in the Peterman way, we teach about like paradigm shifts that people need to have in order to like adopt a new framework or adopt a new, way or process of doing things. And one of them, and Danny's, you'll have to forgive me, it's been a while since I actually taught this, but it was the inner belief prison. This idea that like, and it's the same with leadership, but more so that like your qualities and characteristics are like set in stone. It comes back to like the growth mindset that we talked about before versus a fixed mindset. But we talk about like fleas, and I remembered fleas, which is crazy because they did this experiment with a lid, and like an actual physical lid, not a metaphorical lid of like your potential. And like what they did is like fleas have this incredible power. Like they jump like 40 times like their height. Like they're like one of the best jumpers in the I guess they're the kingdom animal, right? The animal world, right? Like relative to their size. And so they put these fleas in these jars, and the fleas would jump out. Like they can jump so high. Well, then they started like putting a lid on the jar. And then the fleas would like jump up and then like hit the lid. They'd keep jumping and hit the lid. And then eventually they like stop just short of the lid. And then eventually, like when they jumped, they knew, like they created their own ceiling. They literally created their own lid. And then the researchers would take the freaking lid off, and then the fleas would still only jump to that point. Like they had conditioned them to what their potential was. Sorry, I couldn't help it. Like
it's a great example. Didn't think we were going to go there. But I mean, it makes sense, right? I was reading something the other day, and I was talking about a dog in an invisible fence. Like eventually, once it learns that it's there, it doesn't go out of your yard, and you can entice it to go out of your yard. You can call it, and it just won't, because it knows that that's where it stops. So
same with elephants. Like baby elephants, they put the metal, clasp on their ankle. Do elephants have ankles? I'm sorry. And then like stake them in the ground, and like at that age they're not strong enough. But that same elephant grows up and is like mightily powerful, right? But it's still conditioned. Believe it, it's not strong enough because it's been conditioned on its strength of like, even though it's able to remove that stake and like free itself, it doesn't. So.
Interesting.
Wow, really took Maxwell's law of the lid to the next level.
That's good stuff.
Yeah.
One of the other things I wanted to touch on, because I think this is one that I've was reintroduced to me as I was kind of preparing and teaching, and that has to do with, from a manager or a leader's perspective. Obviously, as the leader, you're supposed to cast the vision, but then you've got to back that up and deal with the day-to-day. You brought up the Stockdale principle, or paradox, which we've talked about, and it really goes along with kind of Maxwell's fourth law, the law of navigation. And I think the question that I'd want to ask for you, because I think this is something that a lot of people battle. I see, we give a manager a budget, and it's kind of like, well, what's your plan to hit it? What am I going to do? How do I enact change in my people? How do I inspire them? How do I do all of these things? And so I guess my question for you is, how have you seen successful people balance kind of that long-term vision with kind of as Stockdale calls it, the reality of the situation today? How do you balance that? Like, how do you look at a budget and be excited about hitting it, but also then be able to step back and, in our business, from call to call, be able to influence an outcome?
Yeah. I think the Stockdale I'm so happy you brought that up, because, the thing, like when we talked about the Stockdale paradox, like the idea of like holding on, having faith in the future event that you'll have, but also facing the brutal facts of reality. What we didn't talk enough about is like, and these are, Stockdale was the highest ranking person in, what do they call it? The Hanoi Hilton, right? In the POW camp in Vietnam. But like what we didn't talk about is like the trials and the tribulations and the challenges are inevitable, right? It's like smooth seas do not make skillful sailors, right? You got to have rough seas to learn how to do it. And I think that like, I don't know if being a POW made Stockdale and everyone else like a better soldier, but I have to believe it probably did. It probably made them, those that survived. Something else we didn't talk about with Stockdale is like, there's another guy who had a really similar concept named Viktor Frankl, who wrote. He was in a Holocaust. He was a Holocaust survivor. He was in a camp, and he came out and wrote like one of the most influential books, psychology books of all time, called Man's Search for Meaning. And he had a very similar. He didn't frame it's not the Stockdale paradox, obviously, but he kind of had this idea as well, as like you had to have this like. You're not an optimist, but you're also not a pessimist. And I think that's what Stockdale talked about, right? Is like, hey, the optimist died, but also like pessimism didn't work out either. It's just like this healthy balance. And so I think as a leader, it's like, I got to know what my goal, like if we don't have goals, then what in the hell are we even shooting at, right? It's like they're necessary because they're charting the course for you. You have to always know what the goal is in mind. But I think like, and the day-to-day, like first and foremost, it's like small changes matter. Small things matter. They add up to big changes, right? It's like why all those, that's why there's self-help books on like habits, right? Because all those books are built upon the idea of like making small changes every day and building upon them. Well, it's the same thing, but I think like we go into this thinking like that you're pursuing perfection, and it couldn't be more false. It's like, you're actually like, hoping for and praising like the challenges and the failures, because that's going to make a little bit of growth each day. And so I think like we try to make perfect days when it's like, no, we just need to get better the next day over the next day over the next day. And I think that's like the brutal, harsh reality. And it's like facing that allows for you to like what we just talked about, like foster a culture of learning, foster a culture of resiliency, getting better and improving. But again, like, I think it's still a balance. I think people look at the budget and then they're like, okay, well, we're halfway through and I'm not 50% through. That it's almost like they forget that wherever you're off, right? If you're like behind and you're not at that 50% point, well, it's like, well, you can still make up for that. And it's actually nothing that you're doing any differently, but changing like the small things every single day, coaching to the behaviors and not the outcomes.
Yeah. I mean, I think, anytime I hear someone, a manager, in a hubbub about their budget and what it is and all of this stuff, we're always consistently looking for the things that are working against us when we have a whole lot of power to focus on the things that we can actually move forward. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, those are those things, but like, what about all these things that are holding me back from hitting my budget? It's like, well, you also have a lot of power to influence a lot of things that are going to push you closer. What if you increased your conversion rate by 5%? What about your average ticket? All of these things where like that would just take maybe a ride along with a technician and help him close 3 calls. And all of a sudden your average ticket jumps, all of a sudden your conversion rate jumps, and you're right on track. And so I think to your point, it's a lot of little changes that when we don't see the result, the natural human tendency is to look for all the things as excuses or reasons why we can't get there, because what we're doing isn't working. Well, then surely I'm trying hard.
Yeah.
Well, I think the thing in leadership and the thing in, business, life, anything is like, you have to be okay with not getting the result right then and there. I was just making a comment to somebody. I was like, oh yeah, we made that change. And well, as luck would have it, the calls aren't as fruitful as they were a week ago when we made the change thinking, oh, we can capture all this stuff. So it's still a good idea and we still need to push it forward and we still need to monitor it. But we need to be okay with, okay, it didn't turn out the way I wanted it. How are we going to figure this out?
Yeah, we both played football for Chris Creighton in college. You longer than me, and he like did this annoying thing. It was annoying to me at the time, which was like I have to coach something every play, even like a flawlessly run offensive play. He's like, I have to coach someone on something on every play. And I think that it's fascinating, like what you're kind of saying to me. It's like I almost like imagine it as like if I were managing like a frontline team, right? So it's like I'm a service line manager. I would look at all of my calls from that day like a general would, like all the battles he's commanding in a campaign. And there's two different things that you could have two different vantage points or perspectives about how you go about leading your troops, right? You could be the general who says, at the end of the day, here's all the battles we won and lost. That is what it is. Here's what we did, and I can draw conclusions from that, and then maybe inform or whatever. Or in real time, you can look for trends. You can do real time coaching where now the guy that screwed up or missed the thing on the first call, I now did real time coaching and I reached out, and now on his second call, he's actually converting. So it's like, to your point, it's like there are these things that are palpable, that are there, that you can impact in real time. And I think it's harder to do, but I mean, if you just spent an entire day doing that and conditioning those behaviors, then now you can be way more strategic with identifying bigger trends that are heavier lifts, right? It's like the things that you can coach in a 30-second phone call can have dramatic impacts.
Yeah. I think that's a great point in a topic that is difficult to unpack because it's against our human nature to want to keep getting better and better and pushing against what sometimes feels like a immovable rock, but we've got to keep pushing. And so I think that leads into, you talked about being able to provide real-time coaching and feedback and different stuff like that. And I think that right to do that is earned as a leader. And, Maxwell talks about it in his 7th law, the law of respect. How do we gain respect with the people that we lead? And there's a number of things that you can do, a number of things that you can go about doing maybe a little bit differently and different things like that. I guess from your perspective, and, obviously having been in leadership roles for a good number of years, what are those qualities that, and this is taking into consideration that everybody's built a little bit differently. Sometimes you got the really peppy guy. Sometimes you got the guy who's just super organized and gets stuff done and all of that. But like, what are the qualities you think command the most respect from a leader, or in a leader, I guess I should say?
That's a really good question. I'm sorry, I'm not sorry for this, but like, I don't know why this comes to my mind first, but again, it's probably because I had a father who taught U.S. history. And I'm going to make another war reference, not because I love war, but I just think it's like, history repeats itself when we don't learn from our past. Right. But there was, I forget his rank, forgive me, but his story was captured in We Were Soldiers, played by Mel Gibson, Hal Moore. So Hal Moore was a real person who led at the time was like this very revolutionary idea, which was air cavalry. So so taking troops in on helicopters and dropping them into active hot zones, right? And Hal Moore had this like comment that he said to his troops before going into battle, which was like, I will be the first to step onto the field of battle and I will be the last to leave it. And if something were to happen to me, basically saying, I'm not going to leave you behind. And if something happens to me, I hope you do the same. And I think that like at its core, when I think about respect, I think that is like a leader that is willing to do, a leader should never ask someone to do something that they're not willing to do themselves. That they don't either, and I don't care like what level you're at. I mean, look at you lead this company and you've done damn near just about every single role within the organization, right? And I think that elicits a certain amount of respect, knowing that like you're coming from a place of like you understand. And I think like the understanding piece is important, but I think like just the willingness to do it. Like when I was in sales, I didn't hold managerial positions, but there was something about when I saw a sales manager like go and like rescue a call or make a sell and like sell $100,000 contract, and you just saw like the mastery in which it was done. I think that's just like an instantaneous way to get it. And don't get me wrong, it's like you should give it away, you should show it. Like I'm of the notion of like you show everyone's respect and are always out to earn theirs, right? That it's not this instant reciprocity thing. I'm going to give it, but I know it's not guaranteed in return. And I think if everyone had that mindset, I think it would probably solve for a lot of things beyond even successful businesses. But I think if I'm a manager, it's like when I know that my leader is willing to like spill the same sweat and blood and the same mud and like do the things that I have to do day in and day out. I just, that to me is when you ask about respect, that is like at its core. It's like, show me you can do it. And also like, show me that like when you do it, you mess up. Like you fail at stuff too, that you're human, that you're not perfect, that it's all about the learning. But yeah, how more is like comes immediately to mind.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, for those of us that haven't yet done it, I was always a big believer. Obviously the technical stuff is not something that I'm, well versed in. And so for me, it was more so, on the other side of that is just admitting that I don't know how to do this. Like there's no reason to fake it. You're not building any sort of trust or respect if you're acting like I can't do this. It's more so, I always came from a place of how can I support you? Also pointing out that, hey, if it seems like I think I know what I'm doing, I actually don't. That's what you're here for. That's why we're working together as a team. I kind of do my things. You do your things. Yeah. That's how we get things accomplished. And so I think that's a great point, and kind of leads into maybe kind of the last question here, so we can kind of stay on our timeline here. The law of intuition.
Oh, geez. Law of intuition.
Yep. So
Maxwell says it's the hardest one to teach.
I would agree with that.
And I did this one on accident. Well, sort of. Like I had the intuition to do a thing on intuition. And I think I talked about like leading or in the gray or nuance or whatever. And then we realized it's an actual law. And then that's when I remembered that it's the hardest one. So
yeah.
Apologies if I didn't do that one justice.
No, I thought it was great. But with intuition, so this is not black and white. There is no SOP for this. There is nothing. And to me, intuition is built off of a willingness and a goal of serving others. Like if you are very dead set in that I am the manager, I am right, I am here to tell everybody else what to do, and my ultimate goal is not necessarily to serve others, it's going to be very difficult to build any intuition because you're not thinking about anybody else. You're thinking about yourself. And so for me, it's understanding that intuition is built. Now, to me, as we've talked and known each other for quite a few years, you are very good at reading people. I don't even know what that means. I don't know how to read people. I don't know how to do any of this. But how have you developed that skill? Like what is, maybe it's not even a skill you develop. Maybe it's just something that's come naturally to you. But like if I'm sitting here and you're teaching me how to develop intuition, what are some key points you're going to tell me?
Yeah. Even when I left our talk that day, I was like, man, I wish there were more like concrete things I could have said to say like, okay, well, this all makes sense and I get that. But essentially someone could have left that room saying like, okay, I guess like I just got to trust my gut. And it's like, I first like learned the word instinct. I played quarterback in football, and my dad was like explaining to me the skill that I had, and he was trying to like coach me into understanding what the word was, and I didn't get it, and it was like instinct, and I was like, oh, okay, instinct, like, okay, you made decisions he was like, it was like having a coach on the field, like you were instinctual, you understood things, you saw the bigger picture. And I think when I talked about intuition, it was like, another one of those leadership things. It was like innate. You were either born more instinctual or not. This is why I think I would make a great spy, by the way, except for the fact that I think I'm a little too, I focus too much on the connection with the person where I need to be easily forgotten. And I haven't mastered that part yet. But I think like you named like one of them, I think is experience. It's like the more situations that you encounter, right? The more patterns it's all pattern recognition. It's seeing trends. Like, I am confident that I can walk into this building, I can look at someone's face, and I can tell you what kind of mood they're in. Like, and that's just from patterns. I mean, I had to do it with hundreds of students every single day. It's like, I got a lot of practice at that. So it's pattern recognition on situations. I think it's studying past decisions, both decisions that other people have made and that you've made, reflecting on decisions you've made and actually like critiquing those decisions. How would you have done that differently? How should they have done that differently? Well, what would have happened if they done, like, I live in that world. I'm the guy that like is in the restaurant and I'm thinking of my escape plan if like something bad happens. I am a prepare. I have that. I know that's crazy, but it's just like, I am constantly looking at where I'm at and who I'm with and what's around me, and just being very observant. And I think when you're a leader, you have to do that, but with your people. You have to know when they're having a bad day, because then you can get ahead of it. I think also it's like, observe and learn from great leaders that are out there, like other people. And I don't think that's necessarily you or me. I think that there's a lot of like hyper successful people out there that probably have a lot of feedback on how they built their own intuition. And like, really, when you look at it, it's like, who are leaders that have made like strong instinctive decisions that really change? I talked about Steve Jobs, that changed the course of a company's trajectory. Pattern recognition, like looking at patterns, like we talked about on the dispatch, but it's like, can you see a pattern and then equate that to like a thing that a field professional is or not doing, and saying like, okay, well, what are the mistakes? What's missing from here? What should they have done here? Being really comfortable with ambiguity. That's why it's such a hard one to teach. I think you want to roll out like it's black and white and you have the processes and the SOPs, and those are all important. I'm never going to say that they're not, but I've always been more of the, like, I'm a loyalty to the outcomes person, not the processes. Like, if it gets the outcomes we want, then it probably means that we needed to amend or change the processes to get there. But in order to really be comfortable with ambiguity, I think you got to be really like, you got to trust your gut, but you got to verify it with logic.
Yeah. No, I would agree with all of that. I think the one thing that I took from there that's interesting is you've always got to be willing to experiment. And along with experimentation, I think the other piece is you have to come at situations from a place of, as I said earlier, serving others, but trying to help solve the problem. So many times during the day, a problem is brought to you. And it's like, great. But the only way to build your intuition is to first try to solve said problem, or, to your point, an example about the call board, try to understand why it's not doing what it should. Like, how do we figure out what it should be doing? And then, hey, I noticed that it's not doing this. This is kind of what I'm thinking. What do you think? Or like, let's talk about this. Like, let's figure out why there is an issue. And I think so many times, especially in a, leaders of leaders, or, even in, if you're leading individual contributors, like just bringing up the fact that they're not achieving what they should achieve is not enough. Like, they're well aware in most instances. It's more so, did you take the time to dig in and try to uncover why is this happening, and then be able to ask the questions? Because to me, that's what builds intuition. Then in the future, if Johnny or whoever it may be is not doing great, well, then it's really easy to figure out what I need to do to get him back on the right course. So I think all in all, we're kind of right at time. And obviously I want to stick to kind of our 30-minute threshold here. But again, I think these laws, especially the first 10, those are kind of the basis of where they all spawn from. I think there's so much good stuff in here. And I think it's one of those things that you just have to keep going over them, because in every day there is probably a law that you've forgotten, didn't think about, maybe acted in, opposite of how you should have, different stuff like that. I just think that there's a lot of good stuff here. I appreciate you providing kind of some some context into kind of how you view these things. I encourage all of you to, if you haven't picked up a copy of the book, please do. It's a super easy read. All the chapters are short, a lot of stories, not as many World War II stories as he would probably like, but there are probably some. But all in all, excited again to be talking about this topic. I think it's something that we all can get better at every single day, and that really spans across our professional, our personal relationships, everything that we encounter. All of these laws play a role in that. So thank you for your time, sir.
Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like to connect with me personally, you can find me at chadmpeterman.com. To see what our team's up to, you can visit petermanbros.com. Don't forget to check out the YouTube channel and consider joining the CSTG arena. As always, keep growing out there.